All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Blue Goat Bard, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about some 5e setting and campaign planning. The idea is to start from scratch and work our way up from there. Let's see, how's everything look over her? So far, so good. Now, this is also just kind of a test run. This should really be episode 0.5. You know what? We're going to change that. Because today is all about kind of learning about how we want to set this up. There. And really the backbone of the design as it sits. So, let's talk about why. Why is the most important thing. But in order to talk about why, I need to talk a little bit about myself real quick. Now, I don't know how loud this is in the background, but it's not putting out anything on my screen. There we go. All right. I don't need that anymore. I know how I sound. I'm beautiful. So, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons about... How old am I? Old. 25 years ago. It was 9th grade. My friends and I, a very small group of friends, didn't necessarily fit in with the rest of the crowd, and my stepdad's brother-in-law had introduced me to the second edition Player's Handbook Dungeons and Dragons. Now it was super beat up, like the edges were frayed. It had a couple pages missing. Some of it was stuck together. It was like drawn on. It was like in real rough shape. Why are you unfocused? I am right there. Beautiful. And he and I got along really well. And the way he spoke about Dungeons and Dragons reminded me a lot of the different video games that I've played. Now, I kind of grew up on the Final Fantasy series. So the idea of being able to create my own characters and have my own adventures was really big deal for me. Of course, I knew the most about it. Like, I had the book, and I sat and I read the book for probably a good 2 weeks, just reading through it, trying to understand it, like really get a grasp on it. I mean, THAC0 was THACO, 2-hit armor class 0, was a needlessly complicated topic that took some time to really understand, because it worked in reverse to what like 5th edition, 3.5 edition Dungeons and Dragons worked. So I spent some time really just kind of getting used to it and trying to sell my buddies on the idea of Dungeons and Dragons. Eventually, I convinced my buddy Josh, David, and holy hell, I had one more. Man, this has been so long ago. I want to say it was... I had a couple. Josh and David were the main ones. And then Ronnie. But a couple other people came in and out. Anyways, finally convinced them to do it. Now, it was 9th grade, so none of us had cars. So, hey, what's up, Two Gun? Welcome to the stream. We are talking 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons setting campaign design. I'm basically... Well, I'm doing a primer right now. I'm really talking about how I got into this. So, we're about to start playing this game. We only have one book. We don't realize that there's a monstrous manual, a Dungeons and Dragons DM guide. We think the Player's Handbook is everything that you need. So, I, being the most knowledgeable about the subject, decide that I'm going to take on the DM role, which honestly was the exact opposite of what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be a player. But when you have the knowledge and the rest of the people don't, you know, you kind of take on the educator's role, and the educator's role tends to be the dungeon master. Why do you keep going to sleep? I'll kill you. Anywho, so no car, nowhere to actually do this. So we post up in the library at the high school. Now, they didn't really want us there, but they didn't really have a choice because we weren't actually doing anything wrong, as long as we weren't disruptive. And the hardest part was figuring out how to constantly roll dice on wooden tables without pissing everyone in the library off. So, and then talking about this loud the whole time so that, you know, people who are reading could still concentrate. Anyways, whatever. So that went on for pretty much all of high school. We moved from place to place. We eventually got cars. We started gaming at a buddy's house, and I made all of the typical DM mistakes. You know, I was a control freak. I railroaded. I denied my players certain things that they wanted. Rocks fall, everyone dies. You know, I said there's nothing in that direction. It's like, well, I want to go to this town. It's like, oh, well, you walk and there's a wall in your way. You know, I did all of the typical DM tactics that were just kind of crappy that you'll find on the that you'll find on forums everywhere, people bitching about bad DMs. I did all of them. But as the years went by, I got better, and I tried my hand at designing things, like making our own settings, but games always fell apart. Like, we'd get into it and we'd reach a place where, like, things didn't work, didn't make sense. They didn't do what I intended them to do. They weren't as interesting as I intended them to be. I didn't really understand my players, and everything just kind of collapsed. We probably ran any setting no more than 6 or 7 times before we all just kind of lost interest. That changed last year. So I had ended up playing under another one of my friends. And man, there were so many things about the way he ran the game that just pissed me off. And the more I played under him, the more annoyed I got. And then the more foolish I felt, because as I really started looking at it, he was one of my first players. He had learned everything about DMing from me and all of my bad habits and all of my mistakes, and had never really gotten past that. Now, he had his own cool things that he did, but he had a tendency to control, to tell people what they thought, to force people down a specific path, to play people against one another. And honestly, it was like looking in the mirror, 20 years ago. So I sat down and I thought to myself, I'm like, I could argue with this guy. I could tell him where he's going wrong, or I could teach by example. So I decided to sit down and focus on all the things that I had done wrong in the past, all the things that I didn't like, and design a short-term campaign that highlighted a better way to do things. And we ran through that. And for the first time in 20 some odd years, we started a campaign, and a year later, we finished it. Start to finish. I let go of the reins. I said, you guys can make any character that you want. You can roll your dice. You can pick whatever you want. I don't care. 5th edition D&D. The only requirement is that you have to start off at a specific level, and you have to accept that you're good at characters, or at least good-ish, and there is a bit of a story. As long as you can accept that, we'll do just fine. And they did, and we did great. They loved the freedom. I rolled with the punches where I could, and when we finished that campaign, we all decided that we wanted an open setting where the players can kind of make their own stories and their own adventures and their own goals without needing to follow a prescribed storyline. So that's where we were. I told them, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work on something. Here's the idea. We're going to have this giant archipelago island nation with multiple different races controlling different areas, and there's wars between the different races, and they all have different goals and needs, and there's going to be a lot of magic and this and that, and everyone was real excited. And the more I sat down and talked about it, the more I realized how far over my head I was. And now that brings us to today. I've got a lot written down. I've got a general idea, but I really want to talk about why we're doing this. Like, why should I make a setting versus buying a professional product? That's a really good question. The thing about professional products is they have a whole team of people that are highly educated on various different subjects that have the ability to sit down with however much time it takes and focus on their aspect, get it to a certain point, and then figure out how to work it in with everyone else's, make adjustments, and push it out. You're going to get a lot with a professional product. You'll get professionally made maps, you'll get a professional editing, you'll get some really intelligent people sitting down and making the product. But the problem with professional products, they tend to be very limited in scope and design. And there's a reason for that. The more focused you get, the better your polish can be. There's a difference between making a map of a village versus making a map of a house versus making a map of a room. Like, the smaller, the tighter your focus, we'll say, the more detail you can add in there. I mean, imagine if you had to draw a map of 200 different houses. You're probably only going to focus on generalities. Eventually, like, a lot of your houses are going to kind of look the same. You're going to reuse stuff. You're going to start losing interest in different aspects. You might focus on the roads, the general outline of the houses, where very specific important parts are. But like, which houses have flower boxes? Which houses have pitched roofs? Which houses have multiple chimneys? That kind of stuff kind of falls by the wayside because it's a little bit more work. But then you go to an individual house and you start designing that. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can do room placement. I can design kind of, how many feet there are between here and here. I can put different things in different rooms. But then, even then, you start kind of getting down to like, okay, like individual furniture. Wow, that's a lot. I have to design this for every room, and there might be 10 rooms in the house. Maybe there's only 5, but like the more there are, the more difficult it becomes. And then you start to get down to like a single room. And the cool thing about a single room is like, you can really draw it all out. It gets real simple to just, okay, I've got a bedroom, so I have to have bedroom furniture. So I've got a 4-poster bed, and maybe there's 5 pillows on the bed, and it's got a canopy, and then on the side there's a fireplace that extends out from the wall about 6 inches or so, and it's bricked in, and there's always wood in there burning, and there's a chimney that kind of goes up the wall and pokes out the ceiling in the corner. And then there's a big mantle that's polished, but it's also worn because the guy who lives there constantly goes up there and is moving around and picking up the pictures because he's trying to remember the family that he lost to an orc raid 20 years ago. And picking up and putting down the pictures leaves grooves and scratches and everything all over the wood. And that is a level that you wouldn't necessarily be able to accomplish without a lot of work and a lot of time as the size of your project grows. So a professional product, they tend to focus on 1 or 2 things. Generally speaking, right now, a lot of what's being put out is a storyline style. I can't remember what they call it. Adventure path. So it takes you from place to place, and it fleshes out a little area, and then takes you somewhere else and ups the challenge. And it's designed to take characters from level to level to level, but to draw them kind of along by the nose to different areas. That's cool. My problem with a professional adventure is there's only so much depth. There's only depth along a specific groove designed by the people who wrote the campaign. And that's fine. That's great. But that may not be the groove that your players are into. They're really cool. Hey, take it easy, Two Gun. I remember we played Red Hand of Doom back in the day. It's one of the most celebrated 3rd edition published modules that exist. It's amazing. your players begin by getting jumped by a series of orcs in a forest, and you end up progressing into realizing that a giant army is heading this way, and you're on a time crunch, and dragons start popping up, dragons spawn, and you have to basically eventually go and fight the spawn of Tiamat, one of the gods of dragonkind. And it's a slow build. It's a great setting. It really is. But they use the time crunch to narrow that groove. And while you get some depth along the storyline, once you're done with the setting, it's not interesting. It's done. It's throwaway. So why make a setting? And notice I say setting, not campaign. So a campaign or adventure, what did I say? Adventure path. So what we're looking at here is the difference between story and settings. And I know I'm reusing the word setting, but I'll explain in a second. An adventure path, a campaign, they tend to have a direction. Players come into the game, they have to make certain assumptions about their character's motives. And then they are drawn in by a hook. And that hook sends them off in a specific direction that ultimately culminates in the climax of the adventure. Now, they can deviate in small places, but if at any point during the adventure they want to break off and go, do XYZ or whatever, a lot of the times that's made a lot more difficult by the linear nature of the adventure path. And that's fine for certain things. For short-term adventures, I think adventure paths are amazing. They don't allow a character or a player to explore their character's motivations, desires, as much, and they don't allow for random discovery nearly as much. They don't allow for the changing nature of characters' personalities to occur. You have to accept a hook and then kind of follow from one point to the next. And a well-written adventure path does a really good job of making you feel like that choice is a good thing. It's automatic. It's natural. You take care of this problem, and then this one kind of appears, and it's like it makes you want to have to go after it. So a badly designed one, you're going to get over this problem if you ever make it there, and this problem appears, and it's like you don't really have any connection to it. It's like you have to make up a reason to bite that hook. Good adventure paths don't have that. They just present the next hook, and you're already hooked. So that's a storyline. So storyline tends to be railroady. And what I mean by railroady is that jumping off the storyline pretty much means that you don't have a game to play. And at the same time, many adventure paths, if you do jump off the storyline, let's say you decide to have your DM flesh out the world around it a little bit better and you want to go do your own thing, it means really bad things end up happening because they leave it up to the players to be the ones to save everything. And if they're not there to do it, then the logical thing is whoever's doing the bad thing wins. So tends to destroy the setting. Now, settings. Settings don't necessarily have to have storylines. And by that I mean is wherever you decide to start the player, they don't have to have a hook to lead you off to some grand adventure that leads you to one hook after another. The thing about a setting is a setting has history. It has people in it that are already doing their own thing. There are already events in motion that either have been in motion or are about to go into motion or whatever that are going to occur regardless of whether or not your players get involved in them or not. Now, settings tend to be more complicated. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot more you have to take into account. There's a lot more history that has to be known. But the thing about a setting is it allows the DM to hand control of direction over to the players. And a good DM should have the ability to really know a lot about the setting and put certain things on the back burner that are not important to what the players are focused on right now, and develop and intertwine the things that are going on in the player's view. So what a setting does versus a campaign is it takes the control out of the hands of the DM or a book, which the interesting thing about an adventure path is the DM doesn't really have that much control. He's really just kind of educating the storyline. But in a setting, he kind of has to design and inject himself into it based on the actions of the characters. He's much more reactionary, and the characters take more control of the reins. And this is a good thing. Why is this a good thing? Well, I'm going to reference Mario Maker. So Mario Maker is a hugely popular game, and not just because it's based on an already overwhelmingly popular franchise. Mario Maker takes all of the aspects of various previous Mario games and puts the building aspect of that into the hands of the player. Now, what does this do? That means that all of the people that work behind the scenes don't have to constantly work to churn out new content, because the player base is doing that for them. And that means that there is a never-ending replayability of this game, because one person going through and playing is going to find it very difficult to play all of the content that's being put out. So in the context of D&D, that means that as a DM, if you're not having to generate everything, like where things are going and motivations and hooks and stuff like that, if you're leaving some of that in the hands of the player, which you should have somewhere between 2 and 6 players, that means there are more people working on the content of the world and the adventure than just you, which means you get a little bit more, you get more out of what you're doing. In addition, players tend to surprise you. They will do things that you don't necessarily expect, and they will force you out of your comfort zone. We tend to go to things and reuse things that are tested by ourselves, that we're confident in, and we tend to use those a lot over and over and over again. And players have the ability to go in and just step off those little rails that we put forward and force us into uncomfortable situations and force us to have to adapt. And a good DM should be able to go in and really adapt to whatever situation is thrown at them and turn it into something fun and reward players. And that's a big thing, rewarding players. So what a setting can do versus a campaign is it really allows you to put multiple hooks in the water, some that are very developed, some that are not very developed, and really see what your players are going to latch onto. And the reason why I bring that up, and I'm going to bring something up from the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons DM guide. In the very first chapter of the book, are you chewing on my chair? You are chewing on my chair. Quit chewing on the chair. Go eat the bone. Silly dogs. My computer will ever wake up. There we go. So the first chapter of the DMG. One of the first headings is called Know Your Players, and what it does is it goes into the various types of players that come into a D&D game and how to know what to expect from them and design things for them, because the reason why you play and the reason why I play might be very different. So there are actors, there are explorers, there are fighters. Oh my god, I can't type. Sliced off the tip of my finger the other day, and it's still a little tender. There are optimizers, problem solvers, storytellers. Is that everything? Instigators, that's it. and instigators. Nice. All right, so knowing which player is which is a good way to build towards what. Forgive me. This is good practice for me. I'm really not that great at talking extemporaneously. Knowing your players and which niche they fit into really helps you make the game more fun for them. It also helps to fill out the setting, because while you might be an explorer or an optimizer or even both, when you're making a setting, you really have to take all of these people into account, especially if you're trying to do it for a wide range of people. Now, I have 10 to 12 people that I can that I can choose to play my game. That's my pool of players. And each of them is different. One of them is I feel like I'm missing one because yeah, I am missing one. There's also the social player that doesn't list in here. He's an extraordinarily he's singularly social. That's what I'll just say. He will sit quietly until it's his turn in combat. He won't really say anything, do anything, won't interact with NPCs. I mean, unless something really just sparks his interest. He'll just sit there. And at the end of the session, you always feel weird about him, because it's like, you didn't do anything. Like, are you having fun? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm really enjoying this. This is a really good time. And you know, in 4 hours, maybe he rolled the dice like 10 times. So you kind of, but he's a social player. He is there just to hang out. That's it. That's what he just wants to be there. Like, he's not really interested in everything else. He just likes the energy and the setting. Now, actors. According to the DMG, players who like getting into characters' voices. Now, these are your role players. They do voices. They do flourishes. They're really into their own backgrounds. Okay? These are fairly outgoing type players. They're the ones that are going to talk the most. They're going to interact with their NPCs. Your NPCs, they're going to take the forefront. A lot of the time they build like leader type characters, and they have very strong personalities. Then you have explorers. Explorers like to look at the world and NPCs. They want to know what's over there. What's that? What's on the other side of that hill? What's through the door? What's in the box? What's in the box? They want to know these things. And they're one of the easiest players to play to. And the reason I say that is they just want to know what's out there. They want to explore and map and do that kind of stuff. But depth is what gets them. Depth means there's more to things than just the sword on the ground. There's an inscription on it because it belonged to the Nordheim family that was lost, 25 years ago when Brenthel Nordheim, went down into the dungeon and was killed by a black ooze or something, and they've been looking for his sword for, 20 some odd years as a way to verify his death. Whatever. Depth. Depth gets them going. And depth actually provides story hooks for them. Fighters. Okay, these people, combat. They relish combat. A lot of the times fighters and social people are pretty close together. Fighters just like to go out and beat on things. They like to be involved in combat. They don't care what they're doing if they're just rolling to hit. They go from not talking to being loud and boisterous and descriptive and, lopping things heads off real quick, just like that. Fighters also pretty easy to make happy. They don't even have to have really complex combats. They just want to go out and beat on things. Optimizers. Now, optimizers like to win. They like to win D&D. Optimizers tend to be the bane of DMs all over. And why? Why do optimizers piss DMs off so much? And I'll say this. DMs have to walk a delicate balance. They want to make things difficult, but not unwinnable. They want to make things a challenge, and they don't want to make them too easy. So it's like a tightrope. You're trying to find that level of making people work for their win so it feels good. If they just walk in and they kill everything in like the first round, no one cares. If they walk in and they all get wiped out in the first 2 rounds, you've screwed up somewhere. What optimizers do is they take that balancing act that a DM does and they try and push it in the direction of easy. They create an arms race a lot of times because as they get better at the game, the DM has to up their game, and what's easy for them is not necessarily easy for some of the other players because, you know, an explorer might just build their character for going out and looking around and like knowing things and have knowledges and this and that, and they're not great at fighting. But as the optimizer gets better and makes stronger and stronger characters, the DM has to raise his challenge, you know, range the challenge level, which unfairly punishes the explorer. So optimizers can be a pain in the butt. The great thing about optimizers is though they tend to know the rules very well. So they're kind of a resource for the DM. So when you're in the game and you have a question about what's going on and like what you need to do and how to handle a specific situation, and you can't remember what the actual rule is, that's where your optimizer comes in. Now, as corollary, there's the Munchkin. Nobody likes the Munchkin. Don't be that guy. The Munchkin is the guy who uses the rules to his advantage, but forgets them when it works against him. Munchkins are also a great resource for the DM, but the problem is they're only a good resource when the game is working for them. If the game is working against them, oh, I don't remember that rule. Munchkins tend to take the most favorable reading of a rule. They tend to forget certain aspects of an ability. They lose track of detriments. The problem with Munchkins is they're trying to win a game that's not like winnable, and they don't care what they have to go to win. So bad Munchkin. All right. Like me, I'm a Munchkin IRL. Whatever, you're not a Munchkin in real life. You play D&D, don't you, Nippon? All right. Problem solvers. This is me. I am a problem solver at heart. Problem solvers are extremely creative. They might like puzzles. They like overcoming long odds, mysteries, etc. Oh, 5'1". Okay, sorry, my bad. You meant like an actual Munchkin, like Lollipop Guild from Wizard of Oz. Gotcha. Are you a DM or are you a player when you play D&D? Problem solvers can be problem creators. I know because I am one. The thing about problem solvers is they like to take creative readings of things and use them to their advantage. They, in some ways, can be closet optimizers. Might be the best way to put it, but they optimize in a different way. Where optimizers tend to... oh, good. Cool. Player. Awesome. Optimizers tend to build a character around the rules in the best way. They tend to find the best feats and the best options and this and that. You're a half drow? Nice. What's the other half? problem solvers find rules, they find abilities, and they figure out a way to use them in a way that isn't necessarily wrong, but it's not really allowed for in the game. So for example, using spells, half drow, idiot, I mean human. Half idiot, half human, interesting. How's everything sound out there? Can you hear the music and all that? Do I sound okay? So problem solvers tend to take things like prestidigitation and figure out ways to do crazy things with it. And not even crazy, but just like, why didn't I think of that? Like, they only ever buy rations and they use prestidigitation to always make it taste good. So now they don't have to worry about, getting bored of stuff or paying for food or this and that. They tend to say, oh, wouldn't that fireball set things on fire? I mean, we are in an open field with dry grass. Things that the spell doesn't talk about. But sure, why not? Slightly in your voice sounds fine. Okay, perfect. So problem solvers are great, but they can have a tendency to take over the game. However, they're easily distracted. All you have to do is give them a complex problem, something to chew on, and they'll stick to that for a while. Storytellers. Storytellers are kind of like actors, in that they're role players, but they want to take part in the development of the story. Co-DM, maybe, in a sense. So, storytellers where role players are more present and past, like their background and how they're acting in certain things, storytellers are more like present and future. They're really into where things are going and what kind of game they want to experience and how it like lays out together with other things, and they get really into the actual story that you are telling as a DM. So in a linear like adventure path type game, they do pretty well, because they actually help add some depth to the game that doesn't necessarily exist, because you don't really have much in the way of player contribution to the existing setting. So storytellers kind of help bring all that together. They add their own backgrounds and who they know, and how they react to a certain situation as more than just a bit of numbers on paper. Maybe they'll get upset at something and they'll swear an oath or whatever. Storytellers are a lot of fun because they actually help you as the DM, because they say, here, I've got this and I want to do this in the future, and I want to take this object and I'd like to get it back to whoever or whatever, and it actually helps generate stuff for you to do in game. If you're trying to tell your own story, though, storytellers can be a little bit of annoying because they tend to monopolize a little bit. So letting go of the reins of the story when you have a storyteller in your group is very good, and it helps take a little bit of the load off your back. You just kind of have to figure out a way to work their own creativity into what you're doing. Now, last but not least, instigators. These are the ones that will test an experienced DM the most. They're like optimizers or munchkins in the sense that they like to push that delicate balance, but they do it in the craziest freaking ways. They're the ones who are in the middle of talking to an NPC and they just say, I stab him in the throat. Really? Are you sure you want to do that? Oh yeah, roll the hit. Okay. All right. Now, the thing about instigators is they can really make for an interesting game. Like a good instigator that has good intentions can really mix up the story and like create situations that are a little bit more interesting than just what you had planned. They also force you to think on your feet. bad instigators can completely ruin a game, because when they kill the quest giver, then what do? Then you have to do retcons, or you have to start a new game, or... So, they like to make things happen. Makes things happen. Sometimes good. Sometimes bad. The thing about an instigator is, they are most dangerous when they're bored. So if you can figure out like what their other type is, and include that in your game and increase how much of that is in the game, a lot of times you can keep an instigator on the back burner where it doesn't actually screw everything up you're trying to do, and kind of help lead them in a healthier direction. So now, why am I talking about this? Why are we talking about knowing our players? So when you're building a setting, you need to really include each one of these things in your game. So let's say I'm building a dungeon. Well, if I go into it with the expectation that I want to talk about each one of these things, that I want to include aspects from each one of these in the actual dungeon, it will help me design it better, because once I get to the end product, I can say, okay, cool. Have I given the actors something to do? Well, actors tend to kind of take care of themselves, but I've got all these backgrounds. Maybe some of these guys have written their backgrounds, and maybe I can include a little bit about their background in the dungeon. Maybe they came from XYZ guild or something, and I can give them a body in there from XYZ guild. Ooh, awesome. That'll give them a little bit of connection to who they are and the effort that they put forth, and I can reward them a little bit. Well, what about explorers? Well, dungeons, generally speaking, are loved by explorers because they're some new place that they have to pick through and find nooks and crannies and treasure and stuff. But maybe I can include a little bit more depth in my dungeon to really mess with my explorer. Maybe there's a door in there that has some funky D&D class. Well, that's the goal, Nippon. Where it's not necessarily about teaching y'all. It's I want to get better as a DM, and I'm trying to figure out what steps I need to take to design my setting better. And the setting that I am going to design, I want to make it to where it's usable by other people. And I've got some ideas, but I don't really know what I know or what I'm good at. So I'm just trying to flesh it out and figure out what sounds right. And if something I say doesn't sound right, or you're curious about something, please ask a question, because the more you make me think about it, the more I talk about it, the better it's going to be. So, speaking of which, I need to include a chat box so that people can see when things are being said. So I'm not just talking to myself. There we go. Okay, so again, going back to explore, so depth. Yeah, so maybe include a door or something in there that's not just unlock or break down or something, and has a bit of a riddle, and when I say riddle, I mean something along the lines of collecting information from I ran into a window in someone's bathroom and fell out onto a fruit cart in my game. Okay, you ran into a window in someone's bathroom. Well, hey, at least the fruit cart was there. Hopefully it was soft like cabbage or something. Like the guy from Avatar: The Last Airbender who always had stuff falling on his cart. Cabbage guy. Crap. Battery's running low. Un momento, I'll be right back. I need to get a charger for my computer. Boom. There we go. Okay. All right, where was I? Okay. Fighters are easy. I say they're easy, but I've actually had games where we never fought, never had combat. We had so much story, and I'll give you an example. In the last game that I ran, they were exploring different temples, and in these temples there was a secret room, and in this secret room they would find handwritten letters, and I would actually handwrite them out from the villain to different people and from different people, basically talking a little bit about what they were going through at the time. And they would have to read through these and discuss it among the group and figure out like different aspects of what was going on based on what was in these letters. And some of that took an entire session, and by entire session I meant 4 hours, where they would just sit and talk about what's going on in the world to try and figure out where things were going. Now, that was cool. It was. Like, a lot of them really enjoyed that. The problem is I had players, one specifically, come up to me after the game and say, look, I like going through this stuff, but we got to have some combat. I mean, like, I got to fight like at least once a session. I got to go kill something, because after a while my head just starts to hurt and it just gets tedious. And he's extraordinarily intelligent. He's very, very good at discerning what's going on, but at the same time he likes to roll and kill things. So including that in the dungeon, do I have enough fighting? Do I have too much fighting? You know, that kind of thing. So optimizers. Now, optimizers, yeah, you don't really have to worry too much about them, but increasing the challenge of something and allowing them to use some of their features that they've carefully chosen for their character, that's a good way to reward them. Problem solvers. So the cool thing about settings is they have a history, and you don't have to just, as soon as they walk into the cave, be like, the cave system stretches on into darkness as far as you can see. It's been here for thousands of years, once being the host of, you know, a different Red Dragon clan than, you know, for 20 years, where then it was ousted by Murlocs who lived there for 25 years. And, you know, you're spoon feeding them what's going on. You don't have to do that. So where was I going with that? Oh yeah, problem solvers. Put little aspects in the dungeon that kind of describes what's going on. You know, maybe there's some graffiti on there written in Draconic. Maybe there is an area that has been, you know, completely melted down to where it's flat, and there's bits of gold coins like melted into the floor. You know, put little things in there that are more flavor and give them something to kind of figure out. Storytellers, these guys, man, they're gonna do it for you. You don't even need to include them, honestly, but history is a big deal. Dramatic events, traps are a good way. Just put things in there that like force them to kind of connect the dots with the rest of the world, their world, or the world outside them. You know, the thing about storytellers is like, connect what they went through earlier in the day with what's happening later in the day. And it's very important to pay attention to where they are and what they've been doing, and maybe take notes and throw that sort of stuff into the later parts of the day. You don't nearly have to do this with the dungeon design. This is more like the day-to-day DMing type stuff with storytellers. Instigators. The thing about instigators, you just gotta figure out what their other what their other niche is, the actor, the explorer, whatever, and just have enough stuff to do. Just have enough going on, make it exciting enough, and hopefully they won't burn your entire campaign to the ground. There you go. Social guys, no problem. They're just there to play. So, but the thing about social players, if you can figure out what their other focus is, a lot of the times you can bring them out of their shell. You just have to do enough of the other stuff. Now, I don't know my players. I'm going to say that honestly. I have been playing with a lot of these guys for 20 some odd years, and they continually surprise me. I need to sit down and really focus on what they have done, who they are, and write it down so I can have, like, written next to their name, this is what they are, this is what I need to focus on, this is how I can draw them into the story. I know a little bit, but I could do more. And as a DM, it's my job to get to know my players. So once you know your players, then you can kind of build a better setting. But I'm not just trying to build a setting for my players. I'm trying to build a setting for a larger group of people. I don't know who I'm in a game for in the future. And what I want to do with this is I want to make something that is living, which means it changes and adapts and grows. It has depth. Dogs are humping each other. They're both boys, whatever. No judgment. It has depth, so they can go through and really go after a certain aspect for a long period of time. It has history. It has replayability. It has many different factions. An online D&D session? I have never played. No, this is the first day. This is the first session. That's why it says on there, what, episode 0.05. Because I'm just getting started with it. So cool. Depth, history, factions, randomness. Very important. We'll get into that later. And there's one I'm missing. Impact. To where the players themselves can have impact on what they're doing. Now, I'm going to have to say that my years of DMing have led me to this. I believe that what I'm going to try to create is the... What are you doing, pups? The ultimate goal of DMs everywhere. So, with that being said, though, what I'm doing is for me and where I'm going. Might be doing that. If you can do it with cameras, it shouldn't be an issue. But I understand how you feel. It's different. Most online games tend to fail, specifically because of if they're typing and stuff like that, and it's different. But I do eventually want to play an online session of D&D, like on stream. I think that would be really cool. See what happens. So what I'm doing is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the best answer to any question, but it's going to be the answer to some of what I have encountered. And I'm going to solve certain problems, attempt to solve certain problems that I have found in 5th edition, that I have found in my group. And we're going to try and expand what's there to encompass all of the aspects of the game that I feel are important. So, with that being said, let's talk about what we need to kind of go over. What do we need to cover when designing a setting? What do we need to hit? All right. Modes of play. You may not realize it, but when you're playing a game, you're actually switching from different styles of play from moment to moment. Social encounters, fighting, exploring, traveling, downtime. Each of these has a different set of rules, and each of them have their own specific impact and concerns on the game. A lot of these are not really fleshed out very well in 5th edition, and we're going to go into each one of those at a different time, but something to take into account. Let's just talk about world elements. Hours, days, months, shape, landmass, water. Excuse me, the wife is calling. Hello, wife of mine. I'm streaming. Are you coming home? Oh, okay. We'll go have lunch or whatever, and I'll see you later. What? Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry, sweetie. One of my viewers wants to ask you if you were eaten by zombies. She was not. She is safe, actually. So, that's good. It looks fine. It's drying up. No, not anymore. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna let you go, okay? I love you. I'll see you later. Okay, bye. What's up, Frosty Bird? How you doing? Welcome to the party. This is my inaugural D&D stream. This is me practicing talking and trying to figure out how I'm going to design this setting, and hopefully learn something and teach something in the process. Shape of land, water, governments, races, etc. So, world elements. That's a big deal. Weapons and armor. Magic. Gods. That's going to be a big one. I'm probably going to do a whole session just on gods. What else we got? How big do you want everything? How big? And this is the thing. Like, how big do you want to go? Do you want to design the whole world? Like the shape of the world, all of the continents that are on it, all of the races that are there? Or do you want to zoom in? Do you want to focus on like one section of the world, like the north, the south, the desert area? Do you want to focus on one country? Do you want to focus on one town? You know, maybe you want to start your setting in like a town and design area around that, area around that, area around that, and use it as like a base of operations for people. You know, hell, maybe you just want to design one house in a forest and go from there. Finally, phone typing sucks for me and tiny screen to watch Blue Hunt. Thank you. I'm glad you are here on the bigger computer. Deciding how big you want to go also determines how much depth you can have and how much work you're going to have to put in. So the amount of depth is inversely proportional to size. Crap, where'd you go? There it is. Size. Okay. So it's very important. Like, if you make a giant freaking world, you're not going to be able to put any depth in there, or at least you're going to have to work constantly for a long time in order to get any sort of depth. So the only problem with that is like, if you design like a house in the middle of a forest, you might have great depth and you might have all sorts of like descriptions and different things and like history and this and that, but like eventually those players are not going to want to be in that forest, and then suddenly all that depth that you designed, it's not going to be worth anything because they're not going to be there. So finding like the relationship between how much you want to design and like how much depth you want to put in there and how much area you want to explore is going to be a big deal. I have already chosen how much we're going to do, and we'll talk about that soon. based on and in Neverwinter. Okay, cool. So the cool thing about taking an existing setting and focusing on that area is a lot of the work is already done for you. I don't want to do that. The reason why, when you do this from scratch, you learn a lot. You learn a whole lot about the game, because in order to do this, I'm going to have to go dive into the DMG. I'm going to have to dive into the player's handbook, and I'm really going to have to learn the rules and learn how certain things interact and learn how to use charts in there that I've never used. If I took a setting that existed already and just kind of threw it in there, not only would I not be forced to learn those things, but I'm going to be using things that I don't fully understand simply because I didn't want to take the time to really focus on and learn about it. And they probably didn't include a lot of depth to it. By doing things this way from scratch, I'm able to really learn and figure out the why of everything. So, how big? Depth is proportional to size. Cool. Ooh. What are my factions? Who are we going to deal with? Like, who are the bad guys going to be? Who are the good guys going to be? Who are the neutral guys going to be? How's that all work together? That's a lot of everything. Oh yeah. Setting guide. This is going to be the final thing. This is what you're going to end up giving to players. DM's setting guide, and this is what the DM's going to have. What's up, Joker? How you doing? Welcome to the party. So, I could pick any one of these things to start on, but some of them are much more important than others. The setting guide, this is going to be a work in progress. This is what's going to be designed as we go along. This is not a point to start at. It's something that develops as we go. All of these other things, oh man. Each one of those has specific things that we need to tackle. I don't necessarily like the weapon and armor system in Dungeons and Dragons. It forces people to kind of like go through a very small list and say, this is what's best for my character, and I'm going to stick with it the rest of the game. Don't like that. There are certain magic things, magic spells that I don't like. We'll talk about that later. But magic for me, that's going to need to change some. The gods. There are way too many freaking gods in D&D. So many so that I don't want to learn any of them, because that's a very deep question. Like, how do the gods work in the world? And I don't want to have to learn 20 different gods so that I can figure out how they work in the world and take all that into account. I'd rather just not use them at all. And that's what ends up happening. The only time I use gods in any of my settings is when my cleric is, my priest or whatever is like attuned to a specific god. So otherwise, I don't use them. They're too much of a pain in the butt. So we're going to figure out how to make that easier on ourselves. Factions are going to come later. Once we kind of talk about the general setup of our world, then we can kind of start populating it with different people. Aww. Nippon is hosting me and I don't have an alert box. Thank you. Watch this. That makes me sad. Thank you for the host, Nippon. I wasn't being host. I didn't have an alert box going. I'm glad that you did that so that I can... Oh, crap. Oh, no. It's black now. What did I do? Okay, I brought it back. That was really weird, though. Oh, if I take it off the screen, it does that. That's funny. That's good to know. Okay, so... Factions are going to be... What can you make the players want to belong to? Factions are a great way to introduce players to different aspects of the game that they wouldn't necessarily chase themselves, and reward them for doing so. In fact, the DMG has a really cool way to gain favor with certain factions and gain special abilities for their characters. So that drives the storytelling aspect. Factions are great for storytellers. They're great for actors. They're even good for optimizers, because optimizers are going to look at certain rewards that factions give and figure out a way to use those We polytheistic do it all the time. You play D&D, Foxy Bird? And if you do, you use all the gods? They're too much for me as a DM. I want to figure out a way to limit those to make them a little bit more interesting. Oh, IRL. Got you. It's too much to read, and it's too much to figure out how to work in. So I'm a Nordic pagan. Okay, cool. All right. So they have a lot of different gods. So you would be probably familiar with that. You would be very good as a DM for that pantheon in 5th edition, because you know a lot about it, so you can work it into the world. Unfortunately, it's not something I want to focus on. Like, personally, it's not what I want to learn. So because there's just so much that I have a hard time figuring out a way to work it in the game. But I have a plan for that too. Really what we do is, where do we start? Well, and there's a lot of different ways to look at this. There's the macro level and there's the micro level. What that means is, do you want to start zoomed way out on the setting, like to the universal level, the god level, that kind of stuff, and then work your way down and have a little snapshot of an area influenced by all of this? Or do you want to start really small with a small area and kind of work your way out? Maybe you start on a town and you kind of build your way out from there. They have their benefits. So for a DM that wants to make a setting that they don't really know where they want to start, wait, this way. Finding something that interests them and fleshing that out, and then fleshing the area around that out, and then putting his players in the center of it and see where they go with it, that's a good way to start. Because that prevents you from building things that are never going to get used. You know, if you make this and then make these areas and your players start to go this way, you've only wasted this much. You know, you can start kind of building that out and then building that out over here, as opposed to building all of this and then they go this way and all of this is a waste. So that's one way to do it. It also allows you to make a whole lot of focus on one small area and depth in one small area to start with, which is like backloading the effort. You don't have to do a whole lot up front, but you will have to answer questions as you go. The problem with that is, if you do it that way, there's a very strong chance that you're going to contradict yourself at some point. Something you do is not going to make sense. You're going to pigeonhole yourself in a specific direction, and suddenly now you're stuck with that, and you might end up with a setting you don't like. If you can think on your feet and plan ahead and have a general idea of where you want to go as you're going along, doing a micro level might actually work out really well for you. I don't work like that very well. I am much more of a macro level setting, and the reason why, I like my depth built into the setting ahead of time. I like to focus on why we're here, why this world is the way it is, what got us to where it is, and then zoom in on a small area. So, where to start? Well, let's say I wanted an island nation. I wanted to have a number of islands. Pelengo, however you spell that. Pelengo. Sure, and that's going to be spelled wrong. I wanted my players to be able to go from place to place on boat, on foot, because we've never really used the rules for sailing. So if the option isn't there, they will never build towards it. And if they never build towards it, it will never get explored. So the cool thing about having an island set up is you can have larger areas of land that they can go explore and spend time on and do whatever. But when they're done, if they want to, they can hop on a boat and go to the next island. You can include things like shallow areas, shoals, sea monsters, underwater dungeons. You can do a lot with that having something set in the middle of a continent, maybe you can't do that with. So the idea of an island nation is very appealing to me because I can include large and small areas of land and island adventures and the idea of forcing players to have to navigate certain areas and make choices. I'm glad I said that. Where to start? We're gonna put this in between. Choice in gaming is key. One of the things that I have learned over the years is that giving players meaningful choices, so I should put that in there too, meaningful choices, is the key to having a good gaming session, campaign, whatever. One of the biggest problems in 3.5 edition, we'll talk about the feat system. As a fighter, you have the ability to take the cleave feat, which leads to greater cleave. Cleave allows you to chop through one monster to kill the next one. Greater cleave allows you to keep doing that. If you're surrounded by like 9 guys and you keep killing them, you can keep making rolls to hit the next guy. Kill like everyone around you. If you've got a reach weapon, good God, you just keep going. And then there's the toughness feat. The toughness feat adds 3 hit points to your character. As a fighter, what are you gonna take? Well, every fighter worth their salt, if given the option between those 2 feats, are always going to pick cleave. Just a better choice. It allows you to be more useful in combat, you get to make more rolls, you get to be cooler. Toughness, 3 hit point, ain't that interesting. Even if you can take it over and over again, feats aren't that prevalent. As a fighter, I mean, why would you spend all of your feats on 3 hit point when you can get more cool abilities to do? So to say that, oh, you have a choice between 2 feats is bullshit. It might be a choice, but it's not a meaningful choice. Anytime one thing is better than the other, that's not a choice. People are going to take the better one every single time. Unless you're trying to willingly make your character worse than it could be, no one is ever going to choose toughness. That's why when you start looking at some of the monsters in the Monstrous Manual that have toughness multiple times as their feat, it just looks stupid. Because there's so many other cool things that they could take and be dangerous. Like, the Tarrasque, I think, has toughness like 8 times or some stupid, I don't know, it's like, it's ridiculous. That's not a meaningful choice. Another thing that's not a meaningful choice. You walk into a dungeon and before you are 2 doors. They are identical in nature. They have no signs or anything indicating what they are doing, like what they actually go towards. So, yeah, that's a choice, but it's not meaningful. Like, if I'm walking up to these doors, like, I'm not actually giving the players a choice. All I'm doing is saying, open a door, and then there's something ahead of you. By indicating what might be behind them, then I give them a choice of what they actually get to explore. If there is a sign on the wall that says, this door leads to the bath area, this door leads to the sleeping quarters, now the players get to choose, do I want to go check out the bath area to see if there might be something useful in there? Or do I want to go to the sleeping quarters to see if I can't catch some of my enemies sleeping and kill them in their sleep? That's a meaningful choice. So, giving players meaningful choices in the game is extremely important to me. So, things that I want to do as I'm designing this setting is I want to eliminate some of the overpowered options in the game, boost up some of the underpowered options, and make it so that when players have to go somewhere, they actually have to make plans and choose what they want to give up for what they want to gain. You know, going from point A to point B in a straight line, not interesting. Unless that straight line is through a forest and there's a road that goes around it. Well, they might get there faster if they go through the forest. But the thing about that is the encounters are going to be higher. They won't be able to take their cart with them because it's hard to get a cart through the forest. But if they take the road, it's much easier traveling. It'll take them a few days more to get there, but the chance of encounters, and they can take their cart with them. So depending upon what they're doing in the game, what their goal is, that gives them a meaningful choice. And that meaningful choice means they will succeed and fail on their own without DM intervention. Taking as much off of the DM as possible is the goal of my campaign setting. My half-drow is a history nut and likes to make books on and interview ghosts. Oh, that's really cool. Half-drow is my first and only D&D character. I love hearing about D&D even more now. I wish I was smart enough to be a DM, but I know the biggest thing I would enjoy is just creating the world, species, and whatnot. Well, that's cool. I like that. So you sound like you are a storyteller, actor. That's cool. That's really cool. I would love to have you in my game, because that would force me to put different things in the game that I wouldn't otherwise have thought of to do. That would, you being in the game would actually increase the depth of the game. So, and as for being smart enough to be a DM, it just comes with practice. You don't know what you don't know until you're put in the situation. And that's another reason why I'm doing this, is it's going to force me to go do a lot of research and learn where my weaknesses are. That's okay. Death is a part of life. But that's good. That attachment is very good. So, meaningful choice. The thing about designing a world and putting meaningful choice in it is you have to give different ways to go about doing something. I mean, putting two islands here and here and having people sail back and forth between it is not interesting. No one cares. But putting two islands here and having an uninhabited island in between and forcing them to go around in different directions, that's meaningful choice. Putting different dangers on each side, you know, maybe this is the fast way to go around it down south, but the encounter with a kraken is high. You know, maybe there's a quick way through, but navigating it is difficult. Those are the considerations that I'm going to want to make. So, island nation, archipelago, yes. I also want to limit the number of races. Why? Well, I don't like how long it takes characters to be created. I never have. I don't want to spend an entire session creating a character. So we're going to put that up here. Character creation, something. The other problem with lengthy character creation is anytime someone dies, it makes it that much more difficult to get them back in the game. So if I limit the number of races, limit the number of options there, that makes character creation a little faster. Plus, it also makes depth easier. I can flesh out, 3 races a lot better than I can flesh out 10. If everyone wants lizard folk in there, and they want beholders, and they want, as playable characters, and goblins, and dwarves, and elves, and this, it's like, I have to figure out how they all fit in the world. So by limiting the number of races, I can make their motivations a little bit better. I can make how they interact with the world a little bit better. I can diversify them better. They each one has a different feel to them a little bit more. I've decided ahead of time that I want to have 5 races. 5 is a good number. It's enough that you can have different aspects, but not too many and too few that it feels like there aren't options. So we're going to have 5 separate races, and we'll get into that another time. Do I want to design 5 different nations? Not really. I mean, one nation is probably going to have a couple of different islands underneath their belt. I don't really want to mess with that. That's a lot of design. Like, hey, get out of there. I'm gonna beat you. Come on. Get out of there. Move. Sorry, had to yell at dogs. I don't really want to mess with that. That's too much work. But I can generalize what those races want in the world. I can figure out what they're working on in their area of the world, and I can use that to influence a smaller area. I have a tendency to have crazy ideas for species and stories, so when they torture my head, I write them out. So I have like a few written out. You should do that, like when you think about them. I take notes. I have a lot of different documents in my computer about random things that I've thought about that I'm working on, and that's how I come up with a lot of these too. So if I'm limiting the races and I'm using what they're doing in the world, I need to limit the size of my starting area. Maybe, so let's do one major island. And if I want to include all of those races in there, it needs to be like a trade hub or maybe a neutral ground. But it needs to be large enough that it has plenty of areas to explore. Surrounded by smaller islands. And I can put different little towns or ruins or different things on those little smaller islands, resources, that sort of stuff. And that will give the players and the NPCs things to do. Like I could have a rare mineral or something on one of the islands that's hard to get to, and make it difficult or dangerous to get, and that could give plot hooks for players or factions to go do certain things. Quit. So that's something to think about. Quit. Gods. So I'm going to steal something here from the Angry GM. He talked about the gods not too long ago, and I read this article. And he brought up Magic the Gathering. So Magic the Gathering, there are 5 colors. And the ones that are next to each other, the colors that are next to each other, they sort of complement or support one another while also being different. While the ones that are across from one another, they work against each other. So the interesting thing about 5 is they balance each other. There's enough differentiation that they balance one another while working against one another. And the idea with a setting or a campaign is that the players upset the status quo. What that means is that without the players, everything is sort of balanced against itself. And that without the injection of the players' actions, things will remain relatively the same over time. So the gods are all balanced against one another. There's 5 of them, balanced against one another. This is enough gods that I could have them cover different things, but not so many that I can't intimately know each one. So I'm going to do a stream about the gods specifically sometime soon, because I kind of got them fleshed out. Let's talk about the macro level real quick. So I like the idea of an ancient area, an ancient land, ruins. Post-apocalyptic, maybe, but what if this area is the original area, the original land where everyone came from, the homeland, and something happened that drove everyone off of it? Some sort of cataclysm. What if all of the characters were halflings and most of the species are stuck up pure breeds? I mean, sure, that could be something that we could do. I don't want the players to feel too separated from everything. I want them to be able to find connection to the world. That is definitely that's more of a game or party level specific setup. So if your players all got together and said, here's the world, we want to build this type of character and see how that works in the world, that's something that we could do. Stuck up pure breeds. I don't even know if I want to do halflings or anything like half elves. I don't think I want to do mixed species. And I want players to have to make a choice. You're part of this or you're not. Yeah. So Ancient Land Ruins, something drove them out. Some event. Something took the ancestral lands and forced all of the species away. What do you mean by a taboo? Explain that. So I want to leave it to where it wasn't destructive per se. Like I almost want them to leave it behind and it rotted. Like everything just kind of fell apart. That nature, you ever seen those TV shows where they talk about like what New York City would look like if man disappeared like a year from now, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, like a taboo causes a big uproar and it grew crazy and everyone left. Well, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about specifically what it was. And the reason why I don't want to nail down that just yet, because no. What if one of the races screwed up? I like the idea of elves. I always like the idea of having elves as a race. Humans are also necessary. Stop. The elves to me have always been kind of like know-it-all assholes. They have that magical connection. They have the smug kind of superiority. I think I work too much on the nitty-gritty stuff. I think you're vague. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. It's like I am not quite ready to nail down specifics. I'm starting big and I'm going to work my way smaller. But that's good though. Like as you get ideas, you should be writing your own ideas down because you can use them for things. So, and I've actually got a lot of this already worked out also. I just don't want to get too specific right now because I want to kind of build towards that in other streams. But the elves did something and they drove everyone out. Like they had to abandon the area for whatever reason. And as they left, everyone went to a larger continent. Time passed. And they were eventually, as this all fell into ruin, it was all rotted, they were driven back to it and we're rediscovering it now. So this is an age of rediscovery. Age of rediscovery. We're down to 5 races because something has killed the other ones off. Maybe there is a large faction of people that are committing genocide, regicide, that like they're killing off gods, followers of specific gods, and they are growing in size and they are driving the other civilized races back into this area. It's the only unsettled part of the world that's left, that's not been taken over by this large, massive group, this large mass of religious zealots that are attempting to homogenize the world. Homogenize? Yeah, homogenize the world. And it's the last hope. This area is the last hope of the last bastion of safety for the remaining 5 races. But it's extraordinarily dangerous because what the elves did is still there. But unfortunately, it's been so long and all of the ruins are crumbling that it's almost impossible to figure out what is actually going on. And this ancient problem is slowly waking up. The only problem is that's a very large problem. It's a large area problem. And I don't necessarily want to focus too much on that. I want to leave that vague. I know that there's an issue, so there's elven ruins all over the place because they created the problem. They're going to be connected to the problem, and those are going to be what's found all over the area. So, elven ruins. Source of ruins. So, everything that the players are going to find are going to be like old, dilapidated elven ruins, and they're going to be connected in some way to the problem that the elves caused. So I have 5 gods. I have a big island that it's a trade hub that has its own power center that's kind of disconnected from everything. And the reason why I want like a Mos Eisley kind of feel, or a sort of neutral ground that everyone can kind of come together and mix so that the players can experience all of the cultures but not necessarily be beholden to them. See, if I made my island set in the gnome area, like everything would be gnomish. Like everything would have to be whatever they're focused on. They would have to. Maybe some of this problem also stems with disease or plague that wiped out a specific species. I like that. That's actually a good idea. Like maybe there is a lingering disease or something, a lingering infection, virus, corruption in the area that occasionally raises its head. I like that. Lingering corruption. And it's disconnected from what's going on in the world. Like, people get it, but they don't really know why. They don't know what causes it. It's kind of a background element, but it's fatal and it's terrible. Long term, short term, they don't really know. Like spells don't work against it. Spells don't work. Terrible. Too many R's. I like that. And that's something that we can kind of put in the background that is encountered from time to time. I like that. We also need an existing faction, a non-player race faction, NPC non-player race faction. Oops. That's a problem. Evil. On this area. Like, Trolls is good. Trolls are assholes. Another thing that I'm gonna do at some point is I talk a lot about yes, internet trolls. As you wander through the forest, you come upon a small computer kiosk. Computer kiosk? What's that? I don't know. Type something in. As you type something in, someone calls you an asshole. You feel terrible. Take 10 hit point damage. What the hell? Random computer kiosks in the forest with internet trolls? No! I do. I like the idea of trolls. Trolls in general, though, they're very strong. They're not something that a random NPC can deal with, or even a small group of NPCs. Like, you have to have very specific weapons and strength levels in order to take down a troll. Trolls to me, they almost seem like siege units. So like they seem to be like a special mob that is included in certain groups. I'm still laughing at the internet troll. The goblin in front of you whips out a small laptop and says, "Hit enter." You do so. You take 5 damage when an internet troll insults your mother. I hate to say, I always like goblins. Maybe it's because I was raised on Labyrinth, but I like the idea of goblins. But I do want to say this: my players, they've played a lot. They know the Monstrous Manual very, very well. And the problem with that is it's very hard to surprise them. A goblin walks up and suddenly they're like, okay, it's got this AC and they're using these weapons which do these amount of damage. They have this much hit points, so it's fairly easy to know like what they have to do. So we're going to reskin things. What we're going to create is going to be something that is similar to an existing monster, but that varies from tribe to tribe. So I don't want to reward my players for metagame knowledge, per se. I want to reward them for information that they find in the game. So if I fight a goblin and I fight it enough times, I know that that specific goblin, from player to player, it's going to be this much hit point, blah, 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 whatever. They're going to know things about it. Same thing with trolls. You fight a troll once, you metagame knowledge how to beat it. I want to reward characters for learning about different things in the game. I like oxymoron characters that can mix and match without being subject to only using the character of the book. Explain. For instance, I can take one creature and have different tribes that have different tactics. Differect. Oh my god, my spelling is terrible. For instance, what if one tribe, like Zerg rushes, as soon as you see them, they all draw their swords and run straight towards you. And they just attack everyone. But there's another tribe that immediately draws bows and falls back. And they start kind of peppering you from cover. But you don't necessarily... They look different. So people that are experienced would be able to kind of figure out their tactics and react based on what they see displayed by that tribe. Like, you can't have a very small species that is normally large, or a drow that was born or adapted without any sunlight. Yeah. Can't. Expansion character of the book. Gotcha. And see, I want to take as much of that out of the player's hands as possible. Like, I want the characters that they develop to be based on the backgrounds that they choose and the motivations that they choose. We're going to talk about that later too. I think this is a really good start. We have our world. We need to talk each one specifically. But what we have is an island archipelago, a large collection of islands. I like to think of the Caribbean, in a sense, that was once settled long ago, but it has fallen into a state of disarray, of ruins, that's rotted away due to some lingering corruption that was unleashed by the elves a long time ago. It's all good. Just keep playing. You'll get good. As long as you're having fun, that's really all that matters. As long as you're having fun and helping other people have fun, that's it. That's all that matters. You'll get better as you go. So the elves screwed it up for everyone and drove them out. onto a larger continent where, for the bulk of history, that's where everyone lived. However, as the years went on, one faction began to grow in power, and this faction was a zealot for some god. Maybe one of the gods that we haven't designed. Maybe like sixth god, the dead god. And their goal is to eliminate all traces of worship of the other gods and all the races that do so until the only one that's left is this god. And when this god is the only one left, this god will it'll come back to life. It'll resurrect. They can finally bring him back. And the dead god is, parts of it are cat god. Shut up with cat god? The dead god, remnants of this god are scattered about the world. And maybe that corruption, I like that, corruption connected to the dead god somehow. So this dead god is urging its followers to go out and kill, and it's already committed genocide to some of the races. Like maybe the dwarves are dead, the halflings are dead, whatever. It's killed them, and it's driven everyone further and further north until they finally come back into this ancestral homeland, and they've colonized it. And the followers of the dead god have the main continent, and they're slowly pushing their way into the archipelago. But they're not natural sailors. They don't know as much as the other races. The other races have spent time on the islands getting to know them and like figuring out, and they have thus far been able to hold the dead god back. But in the meantime, they're looting these ruins. They're going out and they're finding different artifacts, and they're slowly waking things up. And on this island, someone has made an outpost, and using the relics from the ruins, they are maintaining their superiority over this area that allows them to be neutral, and they're trading with everyone, and that's what's keeping them in power. And unfortunately, someone else lives on this island. Some other evil faction lives on this island, and they're at constant war with this faction. But something's got to keep them there. What's keeping them there? There's a lot of riches in these ruins. They're using that to trade, to gain money. What are they doing with it? Why are they there though? Why don't they just, if they're getting bombarded from this existing faction, maybe they're making enough money that like they can still fight off the faction and it's no problem. But there's some underlying problem, something simmering beneath the surface, and they're hiding something. They're hiding something, and that will eventually come to the surface. Yeah, I like it. Okay, so what do we need to work on? We need to do the gods. We need to talk about the gods. I need to talk about the races, the 5 races. I think 5 is going to be the theme. 5 is going to be a theme. 5 races. 5 major ruins on the island. Maybe 5 major factions. 5 gods. 5 different things that are important, and I'm just going to run that theme through everything, because with 5, any one can have 2 allies and 2 enemies. So even if you pair up with one of your allies to gain power, you've got 3 enemies now right there. If you gain with 3, everyone's kind of fighting against each other to maintain that balance, and that forces the players to be the people that upset the status quo. So I think this is good. This is a great start. I've got an island that I want to design with a bunch of little areas around it. I have different systems that I want to design. I have a lot to focus on. I have a lot to flesh out. So here's what we're going to do. Next time we get on, we're going to save this. Save as new setting. That's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to figure out what to talk about next week. And I'm going to come and I'm going to talk about why I made those choices. So I'm going to spend the next week figuring out what I want to talk about, fleshing it out, and then I'm going to bring it to the group and we can talk about it next week. So, God knows what my dogs are doing. That being said, thank you to everyone who came and joined. I'm going to see who's on. We're going to go raid someone. People are awesome and they deserve support. So let's see who's out there. And if you can, Mercs of Mischief YouTube link in the panels is broken. Ah! Thank you for the heads up, Mercs. I appreciate that. I will work on that later. I'm also working on the chat bot and getting some loyalty going so that y'all can have things to do and I can reward you for being here. Because you being here makes my life a whole lot more exciting. Me talking to myself is great and all, but I'm really not that interesting on my own. So thank you for the heads up, Merc. Please, for those of you who are out there, if you like what you see, let me do this. This is the first of this stream. So we are working on getting to 100 followers. If you like, hit that follow button. Show us some love. Thank you very much for coming out. Who is online right now? I want to go surprise someone and make their day awesome. No one is online. All right. For those of you that are out there, is there a streamer that is online right now that we can go show some love to and surprise them and make their day better? Yeah. Thank you, Mercs of Mischief, for the follow. I appreciate you. You are awesome. It's great to meet you. Where are you from? Are you from this area of the world? I'm in Oklahoma. Or are you from across the pond or some other place? I seem to attract a lot of people in England. Reruns of this week's sessions going. I'll check you out after this. Are you do you game online for people to watch? Rest of our team is all over. Cool. Some in Canada, some of US. The Akasura to raid. Okay. Play 5e live. Awesome. I want to do that someday, but I don't have the equipment just yet. And frankly, I want to get this down. My goal with this is to flesh this out to a point where I can release it in PDF form and have a large number of people playing it. I've got a lot written down, a lot I've worked on, but it needs a lot of work, and this will force me to work on it. So cool. I'll check you guys out too. But right now, thank you, Frosty Bird. We're going to raid the Akasura. Go give some love to somebody else. Oh, I want to go get on their channel. Twitch TV. The Akasura.
No, come back items.
There we go. All right. Let's do this. Thank you for your participation. I appreciate all of you. Much love. Blue Goat Bard out. Y'all have a good day. 2, 1, raid.